Hello, hello, hello. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Wealthy Trustee webinar. I'm super excited that you guys are here. I have a lot planned for you guys today. I'm going to be educating you guys on what a trust entity is and how you can use a trust in order to actually build wealth. So be prepared because I'm going to give a lot of information and you're definitely going to want to take notes. And then if you have any questions after this short presentation, we'll dive into Q&A and you can ask any questions that you might have. So with that being said, we are going to get started. So my name is Christina Yvette. I am a trust strategist, you guys. So the way that I actually got into trust was I became a trustee in 2015. I was actually a registered nurse and I was pretty much in the rat race. So I was living paycheck to paycheck. I was working 5 days a week, 12-hour shifts as a nurse. And I shortly discovered after a year inside of my career working in the hospital that I was spending more time with my coworkers than I was with my 1-year-old son. So I told myself that I needed to find a way to make some type of passive income or a second stream of income so that I didn't have to overwork myself. So with that being said, I actually went to a seminar, and in that seminar, I learned how to flip houses. So I got into real estate, you guys, and I became a real estate investor. And my mentor at that time, he pretty much told me that I needed to put that property into a trust. So I found a property. It was a little 2-bedroom, 1-bath house, and that was my first investment property. And so he told me you need to put that property into a trust because anything can happen. And at that time, I was young, 25 years old, and I didn't want to be taken advantage of because I was new to the real estate industry. So anything could have happened, right? A contractor could have slipped, fell, stepped on a nail, and then there goes a lawsuit, and they're literally taking my property away from me. So because I wanted to protect my very first asset, I decided to set up a trust and put that property into a trust. And I've been a trustee ever since. And so now what I want to do is I want to empower other people to do the same thing, right? To actually set up trust, to create their estate, and to leave a legacy for their family. And so that's why you're here tonight, to learn the tools and the resources and everything that you need in order to create a trust or an estate for your family. And that's what we call generational wealth, right? So you can't be creating or building generational wealth without actually having a trust, okay? And I will dive into that. So with that being said, let's dive into the webinar, you guys. And like I said, it's a short presentation, 30 minutes, and then after that, we're going to dive into Q&A. So the first thing that I want to tell you guys is you guys came here to learn what a trust is, right? And so a lot of people are unfamiliar. They don't know what a trust is, right? And a trust is actually a contract. So it is a contract, but it is an entity as well. So it's an entity, and that entity exists through a form of a contract. This entity is a living, breathing entity. So just like you are a living, breathing entity, the trust is also a living, breathing entity, which means that the trust can actually do anything and everything that a human can do. So if you can go out and build credit, a trust can build credit. If you can buy a house, a trust can buy a house. If you can buy a car, a trust can buy a car. If you could write a book, a trust can also write a book. So there's no limitations to what a trust can do, which is so powerful because now you can have your trust do everything that you don't want to do or shouldn't do, right? Which is beautiful. So now I told you that the trust is a contract, right? So there are several different parts to this contract. There's two parts that I want to point out to you. The first one is that there is a declaration of contract where you're declaring what it is. So you're declaring, hey, this is an irrevocable trust. And then you're declaring what it is not. So you're declaring it is not a limited liability company, a corporation, or anything like that, okay? So the second part is the indenture or agreement, where you're going to pull all the rules and regulations of how you want the trust to be ran, right? How do you want the trust to be operated? So you're going to put all those rules and regulations, which we call provisions, inside of the contract, which we call indenture, okay? So just start to get familiar with the terms so that you know and understand, because with trust is like a whole different world, okay? So with that being said, those are the different parts of the contract. So now there's different parties involved in the contract. So those parties are, and we'll go through that. So those parties are, one is the grantor, right? So the grantor is the creator of the trust. So that is the individual who establishes the trust for the benefit of somebody else. Who is that other person? The beneficiary, okay? So the grantor, one, creates the trust, and two, donates or funds the trust, okay? The second party involved is the trustee. The trustee is the controller of the trust. So that's the person who has all the power and control to be able to say what happens with the assets that are inside of the trust, okay? So that's the person who is the authorized signer for the trust, because the trust obviously cannot operate itself, so it needs an individual to operate it, and that individual is the actual trustee, okay? So now that we know about the trustee is actually controlling the trust, or doing everything that's in the best interest of the trust and growing the trust for the inheritor. The inheritor is the beneficiary. That's the person who's going to be receiving the assets that are inside of the trust once the trust is terminated, okay? So that individual is pretty much going to be receiving distributions and the assets inside of the trust once the trust expires, okay? So now that we know the different parties involved, let's talk about the different types of trust. So there's hundreds of different types of trust. You have to do your research and your due diligence to figure out the best trust for you. So the main two types are revocable and irrevocable, and I'll go through a set of different categories. So the first category that I want to tell you guys about is express versus implied. So an express trust is a written trust, and implied trust is an oral trust. So you have to determine which type of trust you want, an express or a implied trust. The next category that I want to tell you guys about is complex versus, non-complex, right? So with simple. So with a complex trust, you actually it's longer in nature. It has more sections and provisions inside of it. And the trustee is not required to give distributions to the beneficiaries. On the contrary to that, you have simple. A simple one is, it's not complex. So it's shorter in nature. And with that type of trust, distributions to the beneficiaries are mandatory, okay? The next category that I want to tell you guys about is discretionary versus non-discretionary. So with a discretionary trust, that means that the trustee is able to make decisions for the trust that are not inside of the contract. So for example, if you were the trustee and you thought, oh, well, we can go ahead and, purchase crypto, then that's a discretionary decision, because nowhere inside of the trust contract does it say that you can purchase crypto, right? So that's just a short example. And on the contrary to that, you have non-discretionary. So with a non-discretionary trust, that means that they have no ability to be able to make decisions outside of what's inside of the contract, okay? So what that means is that you have limitations on what you can do when it goes to operating the trust. Now let's talk about statutory versus non-statutory. So with a statutory trust, that means that it's set up in a state, right? A specific state, and you have all of the state statutes and codes inside of that trust, okay? So that means that that state, one, is it has the ability to actually, hold on one second. So it has the ability to actually, hold on. Okay. So it has the ability to actually regulate your trust. Your trust most likely is recorded with either the county or the state, and it's limited. So that means that you can only use that trust in that state. So that is a statutory entity or statutory trust, right? On the contrary, so it's actually a part of the public records. So on the contrary to that, you have non-statutory. With a non-statutory trust, it's not registered with the county or state, and it doesn't have any state statutes or codes, which means that you can use it in the entire US and either all 50 states plus the US territories, okay? Which is what you want. You want the flexibility to be able to use your trust nationwide, okay? And with that type of trust, it's not a part of the public record, so it remains private, and it's operating under the common law jurisdiction, okay? So that is definitely the type of trust that you want. And then the last category that I want to tell you guys about is revocable versus irrevocable. So with a revocable trust, that means, and we're only specifically referring to the grantor, which is the creator, okay? So with a revocable trust, the grantor has revocability, which means that if they were to put property into the trust, they could take it back. If they were to assign a trustee or beneficiary, they could remove them. If they wanted to terminate the trust, they could. And if they wanted to make changes to the trust, they can, okay? So because the grantor, the creator, has so much flexibility, your assets are not fully protected because it's actually seen as an alter ego and an extension of you as the grantor, right? So with that being said, if your revocable trust was to be sued and it was to end up in litigation, the actual judge could decide to pierce through that trust. And then that means that that trust will then become a part of the public records, okay? On the contrary, you have irrevocable. With an irrevocable trust, it means that the grantor actually has irrevocability. So that means that if they were to put property into the trust, they cannot take that property back out. That property would have to be sold back to them by the trustee, right? They also are not able to terminate the trust even if they wanted to. They cannot make changes to the trust even if they wanted to. They cannot remove the trustees or beneficiaries even if they wanted to, okay? So that is only specifically applying to the grantor, okay? So with that type of trust, like I said, it's private. It's not a part of the public records. And so because that trust, because the grantor doesn't have any power or any control over that type of trust, it's not seen as an alter ego. It's literally seen as its own entity, separate from you, which means that the assets that you put inside of an irrevocable trust are fully protected, right? And if somebody decided to sue that trust, the judge would not pierce through an irrevocable trust related to contract law. So that's the type of entity that you want, okay? You want the one that's fully protected and what we call bulletproof, okay? So let's move on. Hold on, guys. All right, so now what I want to teach you guys is the steps that you need to take in order to create a trust. So I just explained to you the different types of trust, and the one that I recommend the most out of all the categories is an express trust. That's complex in nature, that's discretionary, that is non-statutory, and that is irrevocable. Okay, so all of those 5 elements should be inside of the trust that you create, okay? So that is what I recommend. Now, what you need to do is your research and your due diligence to make sure that that is the type of trust that you want, right? Because like I told you, there's hundreds of different types of trust. So you need to make sure the one that's going to fit your family or your business the best, okay? So now the step 1 is you need to determine the type of trust you're going to create. Step 2 is once you've determined the type of trust you're going to create, now you're going to start to create the trust. The first thing that you need to come up with is a name for the trust. So this is an entity, so you're going to give it its own name, okay? So the first thing that I advise against is do not name the trust after yourself. So if your name is, Jessica, Jessica Simpson, do not name the trust Jessica Simpson Trust, okay? That's not what you want to do. So the reason being is because we actually want to use this for privacy purposes. So we don't want anyone to know that whatever the trust owns is associated with us. So that's why you don't want to use your name. You also don't want to have the word trust in the name of the trust, because you also don't need people to know that it is a trust entity, okay? So you don't have to have the word trust. So keep those two things in mind when you are deciding what to name your trust. So usually people use things like legacy, generation, dynasty, family, things like that, right, in their names, or they use abbreviations or initials and stuff like that, okay? But you just want to think about it, because that's the name that you're going to be using for your bank account and other stuff. So now that you've figured out a name for the trust, you need to decide who are going to be the parties involved in the trust. So remember, I told you there's three main parties, which is the grantor, trustee, and beneficiary. So with the grantor, remember I told you that that individual doesn't have any power and control when it comes to an irrevocable trust. So you don't want to be in that position, right? You don't want to be in the position to where you have no power and no control. So you're going to want to appoint someone else to be your grantor. That person can be a neighbor, you know, a cousin, a best friend, a coworker, someone who's 18 and older, who's able to notarize the trust for you and with you, okay? So you don't have to worry about who you're appointing, because like we said, they have no power and no control. Once they notarize the trust, they walk away from the trust, and it's up to the trustee to continue to operate the trust. So that's why you want to appoint yourself as the trustee, because you want all the power and control. So the beneficiaries, usually it could be either another trust or your child, just depending on the type of trust that you're creating. And then lastly is a successor. So you have to remember that you're building generational wealth. So that means that with the generational wealth that you're building, you want it to last generations, like 4, 5, 6 generations into the future, which means that you have to choose someone who's going to take over after you. So right now, today, you're the trustee, but in the event that something happens to you, let's just say you become incapacitated. Let's just say you decide to resign from the trust, or let's just say that you pass away, right? So with that being said, you need someone who's going to take over after you and pick up where you left off. That is called your successor trustee. So that individual is not going to be operating the trust with you now. They're going to become active once you step down as the trustee, okay? So the trust is designed to outlive you, so you need to already have in mind who your successor is going to be, okay? That's vitally important. Once you appoint this person, you just need to follow up with them and make sure that they're able to continue to be your successor, okay? And now, the third thing is you want to actually create your trust, right? So remember, we said it's a contract. So the things that you want to do is you want to put the rules, the regulations, or what we call provisions. Some of them that we talk about are spendthrift provisions, right? Where you get to actually control the money from the grave, and you will restrict how the beneficiaries get to spend the money, right? So those are the things that you're going to be putting inside of your trust indenture or agreement. Once you have solidified and created your trust contract, the next thing that you have to do is you have to legalize it. So what does that look like? Well, that means that you have to notarize it. It has to be notarized by two individuals, by the grantor and the trustee, okay? So those signatures are required in order for the trust to be a legal entity. Once the trust is a legal entity, the first thing that you want to do is you want to apply for the EIN with the IRS for banking purposes. So now that you have that 9-digit number with the IRS, you're going to go ahead and open up a bank account. This bank account is actually labeled as your trust fund, okay? So because it's labeled as your trust fund, you can actually open up this bank account with any financial institution, meaning banks, credit unions, or brokerages, right? And the type of account that it could be a checking account, a savings account, a money market account, a cash management account, okay? So those are the types of accounts. Not every single bank offers a trust account, so you need to do your research and find out which banks offer trust accounts. Usually it's the bigger banks like Wells Fargo and Chase, but I don't really prefer or recommend those banks, but you have Truist, TD, you know, a bunch of credit unions, Navy Federal, things like that. So once you have opened up your bank account, you're going to fund it. So that's what funding your trust fund looks like. So you can fund it with a minimum. So some of these banks usually are like $100 to like $300. So you'll fund it with the $100. And now your trust is funded and you have a bank account or a trust fund. And now you're able to fully operate your trust. So the first thing that you want to do after your trust is fully able to be operated is you want to transfer assets into your trust. This is the most vital part, right? This is the most vital thing because one is you have to actually list the assets inside of the trust, right? Whatever assets that you're going to be putting inside of the trust that the trust is going to own. That's the first component. The second component is you have to do the legal transfers with either the county or the state. So for example, let's just say that you have a primary residence, right? So with that house, what you want to do is you want to put it into the trust. So you're going to list it in the trust under the sheet where you list the assets. And then the second thing you're going to do is you're going to fill out a quitclaim deed. So now that property is going to be deeded over from your personal name into the name of the trust. So that's going to be by way of a gift, okay? So now that you've notarized this quitclaim deed, you're going to go down to the county, you're going to record it, and now the county is going to remove you as the owner of that house, and they're going to put the trust as the new owner of that house. That is what you want, because in the event that somebody sues you personally, they now will not be able to take your house away from you. Why? Because your house is owned by a trust, by specifically an irrevocable trust, and is fully protected. That is what you want, okay? So let's keep moving on. So what is the primary reason why you actually want a trust? Well, it's for asset protection and privacy, right? So what can a trust actually protect you from? It can protect you from bankruptcies, from divorce, from foreclosures, from heavy taxations, from lawsuits, from probate, right? And so let's just talk about a few of them. So the first one is divorce, right? And I was talking about this today with one of my clients. So a divorce is actually it's a lawsuit between two spouses, right? And with this divorce, right, it sometimes can be an actual transfer of wealth. So where one spouse will end up with either half or everything, and the other spouse will end up with nothing, right? And so you want to protect yourself from this situation. And so what you can do is you can set up a trust and you can put your assets into the trust. Why? Because in the event of a divorce, remember the divorce is between the two individuals. So that means that it's between you and that other person. So everything in your personal name is what's going to be included into the divorce, okay? The trust is a separate entity from you. The trust is not you. So nothing that is associated with the trust, meaning any assets that are inside of the trust, can be pulled into that divorce, okay? That is what you want. You literally do not want anything in your personal name for situations like this, okay? Next, let's talk about heavy taxation, right? So what's happening is that a lot of us, we are giving away half of our income. And that is not what you want to do, especially if you're living in New York, if you're living in California, those states where they're literally taking 50 to 60% of what you're bringing home, right? So what you can do is you can actually donate up to 60% of your income to a nonprofit trust, right? And so what happens is, let's just say that you make $100,000, right? So if you donate 60% of your income, that's $60,000 of your income that goes to the trust. And now you only have 40,000 left, which means that 40,000, you're only going to be taxed on that 40,000. So instead of you being taxed on 100% of your income or the whole 100,000, you're only going to be taxed on 40,000, which means that you're going to be saving thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars in taxes. So instead of that money going to the IRS, you get to actually keep it in-house and you can use it for investments or for you to actually build wealth, okay? So let's talk about lawsuits, because a lot of us, we wait until we get sued to protect ourselves. And you do not want to do that, right? So you have to think about lawsuits, because we live in a sue-friendly country, right? We live in the United States. Your neighbor, your sibling, your best friend, they are trying to sue you. So you need to protect yourself as much as possible, which means that you can utilize the trust in order to do that. So let's just say that you have a business, right? And let's just say that this business is an LLC. LLC stands for Limited Liability Company, which means that the company has limited liability and the owner has the other half of that limited liability, which means that if you're the owner of that LLC, you are liable for what happens. So if a customer decides to sue you, right, then if a customer decides to sue you, then that means that now your company is going to go, into litigation, right? And so they're easily able to see who the owner is. Why? Because your LLC is a part of the public records. All they have to do is go to the Secretary of State's website, type in the name of your LLC, and your name comes up as a manager or member of that company. Right? So now let's just say that they sue your company. It goes all the way to the judge. The judge decides, yes, you owe them $1 million, right? So what's going to happen is if your LLC is not able to cover that $1 million, then the judge can pierce through that corporate veil, which was your limited protection, and come after you as the owner of that LLC. If they come after you as the owner of that LLC, that means that anything and everything that you have in your personal name is up for grabs. So that means that they can actually garnish your wages. They can garnish your bank account. They could also seize your assets like your house and your car. You don't want that to happen. So in order to protect yourself from this happening, what you want to do is you want to use a business trust to protect you, to be that middle person in between the LLC and you, right? And you want to have everything outside of your personal name, right? So now let's just say that you set up a business trust and now you removed yourself as the owner of that company. You put the trust as now the new owner of that company. Then what will happen is in the event of that lawsuit, and if the judge decides to pierce through that veil and go through the owner, go after the owner of the company, then they're going to go after the trust, right? And they're going to, seize the assets that are inside of the trust versus coming after you personally. So that's what you want to do in order to protect yourself, okay? So the last thing I want to touch on is probate, because a lot of us, we are not familiar with probate or the probate process, right? And so I just want to touch on this briefly. And I do have a question for you guys, right? So let's just say you have a house. This house is in your personal name. You have a will. You put your son and daughter, on the will. You didn't wake up tomorrow. How do you think that house is going to be transferred from your personal name to your son and daughter? So somebody can come off mute and let me know what they think. How do you think that that house is going to be transferred from your name to your son and daughter's name in the event that you only left a
probate
will?
the will? Hi, you got to probate the will?
Yeah, you got to go through probate. Absolutely. You have to go through probate because it's going to take a judge, right? You have to go to court and the judge is going to decide what happens with that asset. And the judge is the only person who can transfer that asset to your children.
Even though it was in a will?
Yeah, absolutely. A will does not avoid probate at all.
Got it.
A will is a wish list. So the only thing that can avoid probate is a trust. You have to create your own estate, right? So a lot of us, we're not familiar with this, right? But this is the way the probate process works, right? In the event that you have all these assets, right? So let's just say you have a house, you have a car, you have, $1 million in the bank, right? And you have a will. And in the will, you said, okay, I want my daughter, my son, all this stuff, right? And you didn't wake up tomorrow. What's going to happen is because you don't have your own estate, the state where you live, they're going to create one for you. So let's just say you live in the state of Georgia. Georgia is going to create an estate for you. They're going to name it after you. So let's just say your name is John Doe. They're going to name it the John Doe Estate. And then they are going to transfer all of your assets into the John Doe Estate. So the house, the car, the bank accounts, all of those assets are going to go into the John Doe Estate. And then from there, now you have to begin the probate process, right? So your estate that the state created for you, right? So you can either do two things. You can create your estate yourself, or you can have the state where you live create it for you. The best thing, so at the end of the day, you're going to have an estate regardless. The best thing is for you to create it yourself. So now, let's just say you didn't create it yourself, and now the state of Georgia created one for you and put all your assets in there, right? So what's going to happen is your estate, it needs to be represented. So it's going to be represented in probate court by a probate attorney. And what's going to happen is the judge is going to pay your debt first. So you had credit card debt, you had medical bills, you had student loan debt. So now all of that, all of those debts are going to be paid from the assets that you left, right? And so sometimes, and I've seen this to where the assets like mom and dad's house is, or the cash that was left is not enough to pay the debt. And so the judge decides to sell mom and dad's house. You don't want your children to go through that. So that's why you want to actually create your own estate. So now during this probate process, right, the judge pays off your debt first, right? The credit card debt, the student loans, the medical bill, the nursing home, all of these things, right? And whatever is left over, then it's taken out the attorney fees and the probate court. So now after all of that is what your children get. So the leftovers after that is what your children will inherit, right? So unfortunately, your children get the leftovers, which is very detrimental for your family. Why? Because one, you already knew your children, that you wanted your children to inherit those assets. You already knew that, right? The second thing is that sometimes, like I said, they don't even get to keep the assets because the judge decides to sell the assets. I have seen it hundreds and hundreds of times, right? So your children lose their inheritance, to be honest with you. They are fighting to keep mom and dad's house, and they can't because the nursing home was $100,000, right? So that's the second thing, right? The third thing is that you unfortunately are dragging your children through the probate process in the time where they're grieving the most, right? Because instead of them being able to grieve properly, now they're being dragged through court and, you know, having to either fight each other or fight through the court system. And they just lost the most important person in their life. So you don't want your family to go through that. So instead of you pulling them into the probate process, what you want to do is you want to create your own estate. So create your trust. Your trust is the only way to avoid probate. That's the only thing that's going to avoid probate, right? And so what you're going to do is now, let's just say that you already had your trust and all of your assets was inside of your trust, the house, the car, and the bank account with $1 million. And you decided, I'm not going to wake up tomorrow, right? Well, guess what happens? Your family gets to grieve properly and everything stays intact. The house is going to stay in the name of the trust. The car is going to stay in the name of the trust. The bank account with 7 figures is going to stay in the name of the trust. Your children have to do nothing because they're the beneficiaries. Your successor just takes over, smooth sailing, because you left everything, because you had your affairs in order, and your debt dies with you. So the credit card debt, the student loan debt, the medical bills, they die with you. Why? Because those creditors cannot come after your trust because your trust was separate from you. They can only come after the assets that are in your personal name. That is what you want. So with that being said, let's continue on. So the next thing that I want to tell you guys about is the wealth building formula, you guys. So we have 3 pillars here. We have structure, we have credit, and we have invest. So with structure, you need to make sure that you're structured properly, okay? So the structure that I recommend is for you to have 3 different types of trust. These trusts, they do different things. They're set up differently, okay? So the first one is a business trust. The second one is a family trust. And the third one is a tax-exempt nonprofit trust. So with that being said, like I said, they do different things. So let's talk about the business trust, right? You're going to have multiple trusts within your structure. So just think about it as you not wanting to put all your eggs in one basket. You wouldn't do that, right? Which means that you're not going to put all of your assets in one trust, okay? So let's talk about the business trust, okay? So with the business trust, you can use it 2 different ways. You can use it operationally, which means that you can use it to operate a business. So instead of you opening up an LLC or a corporation, you can run your business the way that you want, and it is going to be ran or set up as a business trust. Okay, so that's the first way. The second way is you can actually operate it as a non-operational holding company, which means that it's going to be designed to actually manage and own other entities like LLCs, corporations, and other trusts. All right. So now with that being said, let's just use the example of a holding company, okay? Remember earlier what I told you is that if you have an LLC or a corp, right, and you are the owner on paper, what you want to do is you want to remove yourself as the owner. So what does that process looks like? Well, you have to go down to the Secretary of State. You have to fill out an amendment to remove yourself as the authorized member of that LLC. And now you're going to put the business trust as the authorized member. So now that's going to be your first layer of protection between the company and yourself, which is what you want. You do not want to have your name on the public records as the owner of that business, okay? So now that the LLC is owned by the business trust, which is your holding company, what's going to happen is with the LLC, whatever income, you're going to still continue to operate the LLC as normal. Whatever income that is actually coming into the LLC, what you can do is you can do a K-1 distribution and you can distribute all that income to the business trust. So now your taxes on the LLC are 0 tax liability, and now that liability goes to the business trust. The business trust is a for-profit entity, okay? So that means it files taxes. So a trust files a 1041. A human files a 1040. So as you can see, in the eyes of the government, the trust is a separate entity from you. It's not tied to your personal taxes. It has its own tax form that it files, okay? That's a beautiful thing. Because with these type of entities, what you want to do is you want to spend the money first and you want to be taxed on the leftovers. I'm going to say that again. You want to spend the money first and you want to be taxed on the leftovers. That's my favorite thing about these types of entities, because now the money that's coming in, let's just say 100,000 is coming in, right? You get to deduct all of your operating expenses, and then whatever's left over is what you're taxed on, right? So out of that 100,000, let's just say your operating expenses are 30,000. So now you have $70,000 left over that you now have to pay taxes on. The tax brackets for a trust are anywhere between 10% on the low end to upwards of 39% on the high end, okay? So with that being said, you want to pay as little taxes as possible. So what you're going to do is, instead of you being taxed on that 70,000, you're going to distribute the 70,000. So you get to distribute that 70,000 to the beneficiary, and now it's the beneficiary's financial responsibility to take care of the taxes for that 70,000. So what we do is we actually make the beneficiary of our business trust our family trust. Why? Because the money that's being generated from our business, we actually want it to flow into our family so that we can use it on our family. So that's why we strategically set it up that way. So now what's going to happen is that 70,000 is going to be distributed to the beneficiary, which is the family trust. So now that that money is at the family trust level, on the business trust level, you have a 0% tax liability. You're done paying taxes, okay? So now On the private family trust level, you just received income. That income was $70,000. You have to pay taxes on that. Remember, we said 10% upwards of 39, right? But remember, we said you actually pay taxes on the leftovers. So you get to spend the money first and you're taxed on the leftovers. So now you have a whole new set of operating expenses that you need to deduct off this 70,000. So 70,000 came in, and what does it cost in order to operate your family, right? So all of your assets are inside, all of your family assets or personal assets are inside of the family trust, meaning your primary residence. So what does it cost to operate that? Well, that means that you have mortgage. That means that you have maintenance. That means that you have utilities, you have grocery, you have all of these things, right? And then what does it cost to support the beneficiaries? They have tuition, they have, gasoline for the vehicles, all of these things. Those are what we call operating expenses for the family trust. So let's just say all of that equates to 50,000. So now you have, out of the 70,000, you get to deduct 50,000 in operating expenses, and now you have 20,000 left over. So what you're going to do is you're going to pay taxes on the 20,000, right? So you can go ahead and pay taxes on the 20,000, and that's completely fine. Or what you can do is you can donate. You can donate those funds to the tax exempt nonprofit trust, right? Which means that now that you've donated that money to the nonprofit trust, you are done with the taxes, right? So you don't have to donate all of it. You can donate a portion of it, right? So it could be 10,000, 15,000, the entire 20. It's up to you, right? But you can donate to the nonprofit tax exempt trust, and that then becomes a deduction for you. Okay, so that is beautiful. And so now you are done with your tax liability for the family trust. The money that you donate to the tax exempt trust is exempt from federal taxes. All right, so federally, you do not have to pay taxes on whatever's coming in as long as it is labeled as a donation, okay? So if it's labeled as a donation, you don't have to pay taxes. If it's labeled as income, anything over 5,000, you do have to file taxes and pay taxes, okay? So now let's talk about the tax exempt trust, right? It doesn't pay federal taxes, that's one. Two, the reason why is because of the mandatory exception, right, to not having to file for a 501c3 is because of the separation between church and state. So this type of trust can be labeled as a church. It can be labeled as a faith-based organization. It can be labeled as a ministry. It can be labeled as, any of those things. So that's exactly what you want, right? That type of entity. So for your structure, you want to have a for-profit entity and a nonprofit entity in your structure, okay? Now, like I said, with that type of entity, that's where you're going to be donating your W-2 income. So per the IRS, you can donate up to 60% of your annual gross income, meaning your W-2 income, to your nonprofit trust. So like I said earlier in the call, if you're going to donate up to 60%, you're only going to be taxed on 40%, which is beautiful. You're going to be saving a lot of taxes, okay? So don't take my word for it. Go to irs.gov to do your due diligence and your research. Let's move on to the second pillar, okay? So for the second pillar, we're talking about credit. The first thing that I want to touch on is nonprofit grants, you guys. So with the nonprofit grants, you get to qualify for them because you're running a nonprofit. Your nonprofit is the tax exempt trust, okay? So that's the first thing. You're now going to be bringing in OPM, other people's money. The second thing is that you actually get to build business credit with your business trust. That is what you want to do, right? You want to put yourself in a position to where you're leveraging OPM, other people's money. So with that being said, you're going to, one, apply for that EIN. And with your EIN, you get to build business credit on your EIN. Just like an LLC, just like a corporation, they build business credit off their EIN. You can do the same thing for your business trust. Why do you want to do that? Well, two reasons. The first reason is Because you want to leverage a second credit profile. So you, right, have your own personal credit, okay? And your personal credit, you are pretty much limited. You get lower lines of credit, okay? And so that's only one credit profile. There's only so much that you can do because the more inquiries you get, the lower your score gets, right? So, and then let's not even talk about utilization, right? So now with a business credit, right, that's now a second credit profile that you can now leverage. And the reason why you want to leverage it is so that you can get business loans, business lines of credit, and business credit cards so that you can liquidate them and use them to acquire real estate or to invest those funds so that you can then multiply. You want your money to make money for you, okay? Which is exactly how you're going to be building wealth, okay? So that is vitally important. So with a business credit, you get higher lines of credit than you would on the personal side, okay? So please tap into business credit using OPM. Use the bank's money in order to build wealth, not your W-2 income, okay? So that's the second pillar, OPM, other people's money. Let's now move on to the third pillar. With the third pillar, you have invest. So there's two assets that I recommend. The two assets are the Index Universal Life Insurance Policy, and the second one is real estate. So your Index Universal Life Insurance Policy or your cash value life insurance policy, that is your, that's your liquid asset, right? And then you have your real estate, which is your tangible asset, right? So now let's talk about the IUL policy, right? And it's not only IUL, you can also do this with whole life. But a lot of people, they get confused. They think that life insurance is supposed to be used when they're dead, when in fact, life insurance is supposed to be used when you are alive, right? That's why it's called life insurance, because there's so many living benefits inside of life insurance that you're supposed to be utilizing while you are living, okay? And we'll talk about a few. So the first one is cash value. So that means that these specific policies will build cash value. And in the cash value, you're going to be earning compound interest, which is what you want, right? Einstein said that compound interest was the eighth wonder of the world. So if Einstein said it, that's what you need to be doing. You need to be earning compound interest, okay? So now that we have this type of policy, right? So with this one specifically, Index Universal Life Insurance Policy, it actually mirrors the index. So what is an index? It is an indice, right? It's referring to an indice. There's a lot of different types of indices. You have the Dow Jones, you have the NASDAQ 100, you also have the S&P 500, okay? So typically, the life insurance carriers, they will track the S&P 500, which is the top 500 companies in the United States. When I tell you those companies have good track records, they do. So typically, the market is going to give you like 8 to 10% on average, okay? Which means that because you're building cash value inside of your policy, the carrier is actually going to match that. They're going to match the S&P 500, and they're going to give you that type of return for your cash value. So let's just say you just made a deposit of $10,000. That $10,000 is now sitting in your cash value. You're going to earn compound interest. Let's just say the S&P 500 is doing 8%. You're going to get 8% return on that $10,000 that you have sitting in your cash value, which is beautiful. That is what you want because that is going to accelerate your wealth building, okay? So now there's a couple things that we do. The first thing is that we have our trust, right? And so we actually use our family trust and we open up these policies. So the family trust is actually going to be the owner of the policy, going to be the beneficiary of the policy, and going to be the payer of the policy, okay? The insured is going to be you. So the trust is actually going to open up a policy for you and for anyone associated with the trust, okay? So now you're going to be pouring into the actual trust and building up the cash value, right? So not every single policy is the same. You have to make sure it's building cash value in order for you to build wealth with your life insurance policy. It also comes with a death benefit, you guys. So in the event that something happens to you, the insured, then that death benefit goes to the beneficiary, which is the trust, okay? Which is vitally important. So the beautiful thing about this policy is that you get to take loans against your cash value. So you have to know and understand that the insurance carrier sees your policy as an asset, right? And if you wanted to borrow against your policy, right, what happens is, let's just say that you put 50,000 into your policy, right? And what you want to do is you want to borrow against it, you can, right? And the beautiful thing about it is that your 50,000 that you just deposited in there, it's going to be working and earning compound interest, right? But you want to borrow against it or take a loan out, you can. And that money is going to come from the life insurance company's reserve. It's going to come from their money. So now you can actually borrow or collateralize your cash value. And so usually what they'll do is they can borrow, usually it's anywhere between, I would say, like 90 to 95% what you can borrow. So let's just say you wanted to borrow, $48,000. Then what they're going to do is they're going to do a direct deposit and they're going to give you the $48,000, but your 50,000 is still inside of your cash value, working, earning compound interest, and it's still there as if you never, ever, ever touched it, which is what you want, right? So with that being said, what you want to do is you want to put yourself in a position to where you're paying yourself first. A lot of us, we're not doing this. We have to have a mindset shift to where now, instead of paying ourselves last, we now put ourselves in a position to where we're paying ourselves first. So what does that look like, right? So let's just say that you're a W-2 employee, right? So now that hold on. Okay, so you're a W-2 employee, right? So what happens on a regular basis? It's Friday, it's time to get paid. So what happens? Well, the first thing is that the IRS takes their money. They take their cut. The second thing is that Social Security takes their money, Medicare takes their money, the 401k contribution takes their half, and whatever is left over is what you get deposited into your bank account. So the money that's left over from your paycheck, it goes straight into Wells Fargo Bank, right? And it goes into your checking account, right? And so now you're actually making the banks get richer, because now what they're doing is they're leveraging your hard-earned cash. So they're out lending it for credit cards, for auto loans, for mortgages, all of that stuff, right? And so you actually don't want, that's not you putting yourself first, right? So what is happening is, like I said, you're making the banks richer, okay? And because you're making the banks richer, you don't even know. You think that the banks are getting rich from the mortgages and the credit cards, but in fact, they're not. What's happening is that the banks, their number one investment is what we call BOLI, bank-owned life insurance. So they have a bunch of life insurance policies, right? So if the banks are doing it, if their number one investment is BOLI, bank-owned life insurance, you should also have that type of asset as well, okay? So now back to the scenario, right? So all of your money that you just got paid is sitting inside of your checking account. So what's the first thing that happens? You pay your rent or your mortgage, you buy groceries, you put gas in the car, you pay the kids' tuition, you pay the light bill, the water bill, the gas bill. You pay all of these companies, right? The utility company, the mortgage company, the banks, you pay everyone. And then whatever's left over, it just sits inside of your checking account. That is the definition of the rat race, you guys. That is what the rat race looks like. That is what you being on a hamster wheel looks like. You need to get yourself out of that situation. The way that you're going to get yourself out of that situation is by paying yourself first. You need to get out of that mindset of paying everyone else first. And you need to get into a mindset shift of paying yourself first. How are you going to do that? Well, instead of you paying, the mortgage, groceries, gas, all of that stuff first, what you're going to do is, let's just say that your direct deposit was $5,000, right? After you done paid everybody first, you only have $1,000 left. So instead of you paying everybody first, that $5,000 that just got direct deposited into your checking account, you're going to put it into your IUL policy. So now that $5,000 is going into your cash value. Your cash value went up by $5,000. So now guess what happens to that $5,000? You're going to earn compound interest. So now your money is going to make money for you. You don't have to go clock in and clock out to make money. Okay, so that's the first thing. You're paying yourself first. You're earning compound interest off of your hard-earned cash, okay? So that $5,000 is inside of your cash value. It's earning compound interest. It's earning 8 to 10% because it's mirroring the S&P 500, okay? So that's the first thing. Now, the second thing is you actually need that money in order to go pay your rent, or you're going to be evicted. You need that money in order to put gas in your car, or you won't make it to work tomorrow. So what happens is you can actually borrow against the cash value, like I just said, right? So your $5,000 is in there that you just got paid, is in there working, earning compound interest. You're going to request a loan from the insurance carrier. They're going to give you $4,800. They're going to direct deposit it back into your bank account. Now that $4,800, you're going to now go ahead and pay everybody. The mortgage, the grocery, the car note, right? But what you did was you decided to pay yourself first. You decided to deposit the entire $5,000 before it depleted. Because remember, $5,000 came in, but your bills were $4,000, and now you only had $1,000 left. So which one do you want to do? Do you want to earn compound interest off of the $5,000, or do you want to earn compound interest off of the $1,000 that you have left after you done paid everyone else first, right? So you want to earn compound interest off of the $5,000. So you're going to pay yourself first, and then you're going to pay your bills second, okay? So this takes time to build up. It's not an overnight thing, but I guarantee you, you're going to be building wealth. This is what the wealthy do. This is what I do. This is what you need to do, okay? So now that you understand IUL, like I said, you need to make sure that it is a cash value life insurance policy and that you are actually building cash value. So it's going to be putting more of your money into cash value and less of it to the death benefit. Let's move on to real estate, you guys, okay? So what you want to do is you want to put the trust in position to where it's generating cash flow. You want to put the trust in position to where it's able to sustain itself. You do not want to be pouring in your W-2 money into the trust, okay? So with that being said, what you want to do is you want to acquire assets for the trust. You want to start accumulating as much assets as possible, okay? So that means real estate, okay? So what you are going to do is you are going to get a debt service coverage ratio loan, a DSCR loan, okay? With that type of loan, you can get up to 80% of the purchase price for real estate, specifically an investment property, okay? So now that you have secured a DSCR loan for 80% of the purchase price, you need to find the other 20%. The way that you're going to do that is through business credit with the business trust. Okay, so let's just say that you qualified for a business credit card or even 2 business credit cards. $25,000 each. Now you have $50,000, right? So what's going to happen is now you are able to actually borrow from that credit card, right? So you can actually liquidate the credit cards, or you can use it on hand, and you're going to use that as your down payment, the 20% down payment. So now you literally just bought real estate zero down. Why? Because you use a debt service ratio loan, which is 80%, and you use your business credit cards, which was the 20% down, okay? So now that you have acquired that piece of real estate, now you're going to actually start renting it out, and it's going to start cash flowing, okay? And so what's the first thing that you're going to do with the cash flow? Well, whatever cash flow is coming in, let's just say is $4,000 a month in cash flow, you're going to actually funnel that money into your life insurance policy. So now your cash value went up by $4,000. You're going to borrow it back out, let's just say $3,800, and now you're going to pay your business credit card and your mortgage, and whatever is left over is going to sit in your business trust or your family trust as profit, okay? So that is what you want to do, and you're going to rinse and repeat this strategy so that you're able to build wealth, okay? So with that being said, what you want to do is you want to put yourself in a position to where you own nothing but control everything. And I'm going to say that one more time for the people in the back. You want to put yourself in the position to where you own nothing but control everything. Why? Because that is the definition of stewardship. You want to be a good steward of your wealth, of your assets, not ownership. Right now, you're operating in ownership. That is not what you want. Why? Because right now you are so proud of being the owner of that house. But you have seemed to forgotten that that house is going to outlive you. If you didn't wake up tomorrow, that house is still going to be there, which means that what you want, what your true goal is to control that property while you're living. And you can do that with the trust. The trust is the owner of the house. You are the controller of the trust. You are the controller of the house. So you need to now have that mindset shift and transition into stewardship versus ownership, okay? Why? Because you protecting the assets. You work so hard for that house. Not only the house, but the money that you're making, right? You are walking around here talking about you're building generational wealth. So if you're building generational wealth, you need to have these tools, which is you need to have a trust, and you need to be the trustee of the trust, okay? So that is stewardship. So how are we actually going to transfer our wealth? Well, with our trust, it actually issues TCUs, which are trust certificate units. Those are very similar to what we know as stock certificates. So you know how a company has stock certificates that represent ownership interest in a company or a business? Well, TCUs represents beneficial interest in a trust. So with that being said, what's going to happen is you're going to issue TCUs to your beneficiaries. So let's just say that you just set up your trust, right? Your trust now, once you fund it, it actually generates 100 trust certificates. Those 100 trust certificates represent 100% of beneficial interest. Let's just say you have 4 beneficiaries. You want them to receive equal amount of beneficial interest. So you're going to give each of them 25 TCUs. And let's just say that the trust is worth $1 million, right? So that's the net worth. So if I'm your beneficiary and I have 25 TCUs, in my mind, what's going to happen is it's going to register that I have $250,000 worth of beneficial interest because the trust is worth $1 million. Okay. So with that being said, that is how you're going to transfer your wealth, because what happens is if your trust is terminated, then all of those assets go to the beneficiaries, okay? But the goal is to actually preserve our wealth. The goal is to actually maintain the generational wealth for many, many, many generations. So that's why we want to practice preservation as much as possible. How many times have we seen it to where you have famous families, you have celebrities, you have wealthy people, and literally their wealth doesn't even last the second generation or the third generation, right? It's just all gone. Why? Because they didn't have these tools in place, because they didn't have a trust, because they didn't have life insurance, right? So that's why you need to practice preservation if you're intentional about talking about building generational wealth. I hear you talking about it. And so if you're really going to talk about it, you should also be about it as well, which means you need the trust and you need the life insurance. So let's tap into preservation of wealth and then we will wrap it up, you guys. So when it comes to preservation, what's going to happen is you already set up your trust. Your trust is now going to, the thing about your trust is that it has assets, right? So it has real estate, which is tangible assets. It has life insurance policies, which is the liquid assets. But then it also has what we call human assets, which is you. You are what we call human capital or a human asset inside of the trust. And so because you're so valuable to the trust, because you are the trustee, the person operating the trust is going to insure you, okay? Because in the event that something happens to you, the trust is going to need to be compensated for that loss. So what happens is the trust takes out an insurance policy on you, the trustee, plus all of the beneficiaries, plus any and all future beneficiaries into the future, okay? So with that being said, you as the trustee, if anything happens to you, right? So if you didn't wake up tomorrow and the trust is the owner, payer, and beneficiary of your policy, and you had a death benefit of $2 million, that death benefit is going to go straight into the trust fund. So that $2 million is going to go to the trust fund. And now the trust is compensated for your loss. Okay. That actually replenishes the trust and puts you in that position of preservation. Okay. So that is one of the most important things. So now the trust, like I said, is going to take out a policy on you as the trustee, plus all of the beneficiaries, plus all of the future beneficiaries. So those future beneficiaries, once they are born into the trust is going to take out a policy on that baby. That baby is a trust fund baby. Okay, so now that baby has an IUL policy and the trust is going to be pouring in the premium or paying the premium, and that is going to be accumulating cash value that's going to be compounding over time. Okay, so now that trust fund baby, once that baby is 30 days old, the trust is now going to do that, right? Let's say fast forward into the future, that trust fund baby is now 18 years old. They need to get their first vehicle for college, right? So the normal process that they can take is they can actually go to the dealership, they can pull their credit, they can put down a down payment, they can get into an auto loan of $30,000 paying, $800 a month. And that's the normal way of doing things. Or what they can do, because they're a trust fund baby, they can actually go to the trust. They're a beneficiary. So they can go to the trust and they can now request a loan for $30,000. So what's going to happen is the trustee is now going to issue a check to the beneficiary for $30,000. And now that trust fund baby and now gets to go ahead and purchase that vehicle cash. But the trust fund baby is now going to, instead of paying the dealership $800, pay the trust probably $350. So now the trust is actually earning a little bit of interest off of that transaction, which is good. Let's just say a year into the future, the trust fund baby decides to default on the loan and doesn't want to make those payments anymore. It was actually a risk-free loan. Why? Because the money did not come from the trust. The money actually came from the trust fund baby's insurance policy. So what the trustee did was requested a loan from the IUL policy, and the insurance carrier saw that there was cash value in that beneficiary's policy, and the insurance carrier actually lent the trust the $30,000 from their reserves. The cash value it remains intact. So now the insurance deposited the $30,000 into the trust fund, and the trustee then issued the check for the $30,000 to the beneficiary. That's a beautiful process because that is what made it a risk-free loan. Why? Because that loan doesn't need to be paid back. Why? Because once that trust fund baby dies, right, once they expire, then that death benefit is going to go to the trust. And that is actually going to then, help with the recovery of that loan. So that is the process that you want to bring your family through, right? Where you are actually preserving your wealth, where you are ensuring every single person attached to the trust, and where you're making sure that the actual trust is the beneficiary of those policies. So these are the books that I recommend. What Would the Rockefellers Do? That's going to educate you guys on utilizing trust and insurance as a marriage, okay? So trust and insurance policies, they work together hand in hand as a beautiful marriage. The next books are The Art of Passing the Buck, Volume 1 and 2. That's going to teach you guys about trusteeship and how to actually operate a trust. Next is Family Wealth. That teaches you how to actually establish a family office. Next is the Complete Book of Trust, which teaches you guys about the different types of trust, okay? So what you want to do is you actually want to take action on the information that I provided you guys tonight. It was valuable information, but there's only so much that you can do. You actually want to take action on the information, right? Because the trust can be your new form of doing business, and it can actually solve a lot of your problems. It can get you out of the rat race. It can get you out of actually living paycheck to paycheck, right? And it can solve your problems as far as protecting the assets that you're working so hard for right now, and saving on taxes so that you can build wealth faster, so that you can build wealth effectively and efficiently. So you want to treat your trust like a Google, a Facebook, a Amazon, like a big business, not like a small mom and pop shop. So what I want to do is I want to show you a short little video of a trustee that actually took action on the information that I provided you guys with tonight.
Well, kudos to you all. Again, Christina, it's been a wonderful experience. I've been looking at your videos on YouTube for a while, and there are a number of people offering trust these days, and I guess that's the big thing. Don't own anything, control everything. That kind of, I didn't say it correctly, but that is the sentiment. And so it seems like the playing field is being leveled now from the rich and people who weren't privy to this information. So thank you for being such a great asset to a community that didn't have this information. And you made it so simple. Thank you for the recordings. Thank you for the step-by-step instructions. Things that we can go back and look at. So we do appreciate you. And thank you, Mondo. That was a great exercise.
All right, guys. So what you want to do is I want us to work together, you guys. So if you guys are interested, I do have a program where I teach you guys this information. So you guys can either, the first option is you can do it yourself. So with do it yourself, it is a course. And the course has 43 video modules. I'll show you what the course looks like. And in those modules, what you're going to do is you are going to get access to 3 trusts that I told you guys about today. I told you about the business trust, I told you about the family trust, and I told you about the tax-exempt nonprofit trust. So you get access to all 3 trusts. So what you're going to do is you're going to actually watch the modules, you're going to download the templates, you're going to set up the trust yourself, okay? So you get lifetime access to that. So, 3-4 years into the future, if you want to set up another trust, you can. All right. You also get resources and ebooks. So the books that I just recommended, you get those electronic version books. Okay. And remember, one of those books alone is like $800. Okay. So those are good resources. The other resources that you get is everything that you need in order to operate your trust. So if you need tax documents, you'll get it in the course. If you need to have a board meeting, you'll get it in the course. If you need to open up a bank account, you'll get those resources in the course. If you need to apply for your EIN number with the IRS, you get those things inside the course. If you want to build business credit, you get those resources. We also have a private Facebook community with over 300 trustees in there. And you get to network with like-minded individuals and trustees that have already went through what you're about to go through. And then we have a private Telegram chat where we get to chat. We receive announcements. We network with, people inside of our community. So the course is only $997. The second option is Done With You. The Done With You option is where you need more assistance, which is nice, and we actually do it together. So it's going to be a Zoom call just like this in a group setting where I am going to be assisting you guys. So it's 5 days. It's Monday through Friday from 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So it's 3 hours per day. So day 1 on Monday, we actually go through the business trust. So the business trust is 51 pages. And what I do is I break down every single paragraph in the 51 pages so that you can actually understand the contents of the trust. There is no better way for you to operate a trust than for you to actually know what's inside of the trust, okay? So with that being said, that's Monday, and then we dive into Q&A. On Tuesday, we set up the family trust together, and then we dive into Q&A. On Wednesday, we set up the nonprofit trust together, and then we dive into Q&A. On Thursday, what we do is we do business. We actually learn about business credit and business funding. We have a guest speaker come in and teach us about that. And then we set up our board meetings and our promissory notes so that we can go open up our bank accounts for our trust. And then on Friday, we apply for our EINs and we focus on transferring assets. So if you're transferring your house, then we will actually do the quit claim deed together. If you're transferring your vehicle, we'll do the bill of sale. If you're transferring your business into the business trust, then we'll do the business purchase agreement. And we'll also do the amendments with the Secretary of State. And the last thing that we learn about is we have a guest speaker who comes in and teaches us about infinite banking. So our infinite banking specialist comes in, teaches us about the life insurance policies that I was telling you, the cash value life insurance policy, where you're able to actually put money in there, earn compound interest, borrow it back out, and leverage it and use it for other things. So that's exactly what you want. You want to go through the whole entire process of setting up your 3 trusts in 1 week. So it's a workshop. So the next workshop is going to be July 29th, I believe. July 29th to August 2nd, okay? And that is for people who, they want to be in that space, because when we dive into Q&A, you're in a room where other people are asking questions you didn't even know you wanted to know, right? And you're making sure that your trusts are actually set up the right way. You still get access to the course with the 43 video modules and the templates, the private Facebook group and the Telegram group. You get everything in the do-it-yourself, okay? And with the Done With You, after you're done with the workshop, then you get a one-on-one with me so that I can review everything for you before you go get everything notarized. So the workshop is only $2,500, you guys. And the last option is do it one-on-one, where we'll do private Zoom calls. So it's just me and you privately, no one else. And with the private Zoom calls, you actually get individualized support and extended support, okay? So we set up all three of your trusts, and then you get the, the guarantee to know that you're going to be building the business credit, business funding, and acquiring the assets for your trust, okay? And so that's usually for people who have a demanding schedule, people who are, have multiple assets, multiple businesses, things of that nature. The beautiful thing about Do It One-on-One is that you still get done with you, and it's lifetime access to the workshops, plus the do it yourself with the courses and the modules and the community. So you definitely want that individualized support. The private sessions are only $10,000. So that is, that is the program, and you get to choose which option works for you, your family, your business, organization, okay? And for the people who are on this call today, I am going to give you guys 20% off for the next 24 hours. So all you have to do is go to wealthytrustee.com and put in the discount code TRUST20, and then you can enjoy 20% off in the next 24 hours. So with that being said, here's the contact information. So you can call this number. If you have any questions, you can visit our website, wealthytrustee.com. You can send me an email at info@7waystowealth.com. And then you can also visit the social media. So what I want to do is I want to show you what a trust looks like and what the course looks like. So let's see here. All right, so this is an example. This is what the actual trust program looks like, you guys. So once you get access to the program, here's the actual course. Like I said, there's 43 video modules. We start with the introduction and we go straight into trust entity. So this is where you're going to learn what is a trust and the different parties. So who's the grantor, trustee, beneficiary, successor, protector, the benefits of the trust, different types of trust. Then you dive into actually setting up the tax exempt trust. So you get to learn about like the articles and the bylaws and how to actually apply for an EIN. The same thing with the family trust. You get to learn all of that, and the business trust. Then we go into tax strategies. So you learn how to operate tax exempt. You learn the differences between the three types of trust, how to apply for the tax exempt status, and how to avoid tax evasion. Then you get into asset protection, right? So the first thing you want to do is take an inventory of your assets so that you can know what assets are going to be inside the trust and what assets cannot be inside the trust. And then from there, you learn how to open up a bank account, a brokerage account, how to transfer your deed, your car titles, your insurance policies, your businesses, and how to do board meetings. And then you learn about wealth creation. So first thing we teach you is how to build credit for the business trust, then how to invest inside of the stock market, then how to do the infinite banking with the insurance policies. We teach you about the legacy crest and how you could utilize that with your family trust. And then here you get all the resources and all the electronic books, okay? So that's the course. The last thing I want to show you is what our trust actually looks like. So this is an example of what a template looks like. So here is an example of a template. Everything that you see in red is what you're going to be customizing or filling out for your actual trust, okay? So you want to customize it and make it your own. And like I said, these trusts, they're very lengthy. So these are all the articles and the provisions that you need in order to protect your assets, in order to protect your wealth. These are going to hold up in court. This is what you want, okay? So with that being said, you guys, we are all done, and I'm going to open up the floor for any Q&A. So if you have any questions on any information that we went over, I am here to answer your questions. And I'll go ahead and check in the chat, but you can just go ahead and raise your hand and I'll be able to answer any questions that you might have. All right, we have T-Von.
Hey, Christina, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I've been watching 1,000 of your videos. Man, I got questions after questions, but just a couple. So I know we spoke about letting money flow from one trust to the other trust to kind of limit your tax liabilities. For those distributions that are made from your business trust to your family trust, is this something? I think that's a K1 if I'm correct. I think is that something you do monthly? um, as you figure what your profit margins have been from month to month, or is this something that can only be done like once a year or?
So you can do your distributions as how often as you want. So it's up to your discretion as the trustee. You can schedule them monthly, you can schedule them quarterly, semi-annual, or yearly. So it's up to you.
Got it. And then is that income considered 1099 income or W-2 income? And if it is 1099 income, what is the max for making donations? I know you said with W-2 income you can donate up to 60%. Is it the
Yeah.
same for 1099 income?
Yeah, it's the same for 1099. So it's your annual gross income. So it's either W-2 or 1099. And with the distribution, it's 1099. It's not W-2.
Got it. And then lastly, with I know these trusts we talk about they're non-statutory and all of that. And are there benefits to establishing these trusts in states like Delaware, Nevada, or anywhere like that? Or do these fall outside of the jurisdictions to take advantage of the trust-friendly laws in these states?
I mean, so because they're non-statutory, the state statutes in those states or any of these states, they are not applicable. So it doesn't really apply to us because we're a common law jurisdiction. Some people decide that they just want to take it the extra mile just in case. And so they do decide to choose, because you get to choose whichever state or territory you want. So they just automatically want that double protection in case of a litigation, and they'll go with, Wyoming or Nevada or Delaware. The most popular one is Wyoming.
Okay, and I guess for at the very least, it's more obscurity um, in another state. And then does this have to be notarized in whatever state that you establish this in? Because I live in Texas, so could I do it like a Wyoming trust and get it notarized in Texas?
Yeah, you can get it notarized in Texas. So the domicile of the trust is going to be Wyoming, and you got it
Mhm.
notarized in Texas. It doesn't have to be notarized in Wyoming.
Perfect. Okay, great. Thank you. That's all I
You're
needed.
welcome. All right, awesome. All right, any other questions? Anybody else? Let me look inside the chat. So, I got a few questions in here. Let's see. Hold on. Um, so somebody asks, I'm in Trinidad and Tobago. Can this work for me? So the trusts that we have are domestic. So these trusts work for any states in the United States and any US territories. The next question is, how do I transfer a home still under contract? You okay. So if you haven't purchased the home, then two things. You can either have them switch the contract to the name of the trust, but you probably have to close in your personal name because the trust doesn't have any like proof of income or anything like that. So what happens is you'll close in your personal name, and then as soon as they record the deed in your personal name, then you can go ahead and quit claim it into the name of the trust. So it just depends on how how you have qualified to purchase this property. But if it's already under contract, you probably already qualified in your personal name. And so you don't really want to use the trust right now because the mortgage lender, if you're getting a mortgage, it's not going to allow it. But if this is a cash transaction, then all you have to do is just amend the purchase contract to represent that the new purchaser is the trust. All right, next we have Namir. Hi, Namir. How are you?
I am exuberant,
All
Christina.
right.
So, but I ain't got no question. I just want to say you the greatest.
Hey, thank you so much.
Oh my goodness. Oh
You
my
the
goodness.
greatest.
Man, no, it's you, girl. I'm telling you. This information that you're bringing is so awesome. I don't think people really get it. Some do, but I'm just happy to see a lot of our people on here, though. I mean, every call, man. I'm just telling you. you reaching the masses, man. I'm telling you, you're
Thank
greater
you
than you
so
think
much.
you are. I'm telling you, it sounds like you're already exceeding these higher heights, but I'm saying, I don't know, Christina. I'm saying this trust in the states is so big. Like, there's nothing out here talking about trust nowhere. You know, people don't even know what an estate is. You know what I'm saying? People don't understand that, it's power in their name, basically. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that is so true. That is so
Yeah.
true.
You teach
Yeah.
them how to hold tight to it, because a lot of these families, if you just notice, like all over, you'll see people that have these inheritances. You know what I'm saying? They give it off to their babies, and they'll go sell it, or it's just a bunch of it don't make sense. But a lot of them, they weren't taught this
Yep.
way. They weren't taught to be trustees. They heard in church. You know what I'm saying. Look, man. I'm telling you, you are a minister, because even churches don't even teach. See, they operate in trust in churches and don't even know.
Yep.
You know, they go get in these different organizations, and they become a part. They don't even know they're in a trust. You
Yep.
know, so a lot of it is just a lot of, I don't want to say it's trick knowledge, but it is. It's like gatekeeping. You know what I'm saying? A lot of people don't really get it. It goes over their head. But the way you break it down, though, I'm telling you, is awesome. That's all I can tell you, man. Like nobody,
Yeah, I got a question.
nobody.
Thank you, Namir. Appreciate you. Des has a question.
Indeed.
Hey, Des.
Yeah, how you doing? Going back to something earlier that you had mentioned earlier in regards to the tax-exempt trust and the W-2 employees.
Yes.
So this might be some inside information that I might have to pay for, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So I'm a W-2 employee. So would I go tax-exempt on my state and federal taxes and put it all into a trust?
No.
Okay.
So what you would do is you would get a donation receipt from the tax exempt trust, and it would be for whatever percentage you want. So it could be anywhere between 0 and upwards of 60. 60 is the maximum, okay? So whatever that amount looks like. So let's just say you wanted it to be half of your income and you made 100,000 and now you just donated 50,000, you're going to receive a donation receipt from the tax exempt trust for the 50,000. And then when you go to file your taxes, you're going to give them that donation receipt, and then they're going to then, reduce your taxable income from the 100,000 to the 50,000. So you get it back in a like in a tax
on the back
return.
end.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. But just like a federal tax return for your AC unit, it's not money, it's a credit. Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. All right. The next question we have here is, can I put my primary house into the 508? Yes, you can. So you can put your primary residence into the tax exempt nonprofit trust, and then you can qualify for property tax exemption. So with the 508c1a, with that ministry trust, what happens is you're automatically exempt from federal taxes, and then you qualify for exemption with state taxes, county taxes, city taxes, sales taxes, property taxes. So you have to apply for those exemptions. And that's what you would do if you wanted to take advantage of not having to pay property taxes for any one of your any piece of real estate that's owned by that trust. The next question is, what type of trust should investment startup company be put into the business trust? So any investments or any startup companies should be put into the business trust, because that business trust is created and designed specifically for that purpose. The next question is, can I move assets from a nonprofit faith-based trust into the business trust? The answer is yes. So you can move property or any assets from one trust to another trust. So you would do it any kind of way. So if it's real estate, then you would quit claim deed it from the faith-based trust into the business trust. And if it's, if it's a vehicle, then you'll do the bill of sale from the faith-based trust into the business trust. So next question is, let's see. I had an attorney create a trust for me, but the language looks like he's setting up for probate. We are in North Carolina and the attorneys are favoring of the state. Can you review the trust before I sign it? So you can book a consultation if you want, and then we can go over any documents that you want to provide during that time. But I will tell you that when you go through attorneys, they will set you up with a living trust. They will set you up with a statutory trust. So whatever trust that you're setting up, so it looks like you're setting up in North Carolina, you can only use it in North Carolina. And they're going to have all of the state statutes and codes inside of North Carolina inside of that trust. So you're going to be very limited with that trust. The next question is, with the one-on-one help, do you help us through the whole process? Yes. So with the do it one-on-one, I hold your hand through the whole process. So I will set up the trust, notarize it, ship it to you, and then we work on all of the other things like getting your EINs, opening up your bank accounts, building business credit for you so that you can get funding for the trust. And then doing infinite banking and transferring all of your assets into any and all of the 3 trusts. So we work through all of that together so you get extended support and the comfort of knowing that you set up everything correctly. The next question is, does recording the quitclaim deed trigger a due on sale clause? That's a good question. So it actually doesn't. So are you required to record a quitclaim deed? So no, you're not required to record a quitclaim deed. You could record a warranty deed if you want, but if you are putting the property into the trust, you do have to record a new deed. So it can't stay in the deed, you know, that is already in existing now, which is the deed that has your name on it. Okay, so you have to do a new deed. That's the first thing. The second thing is that it does not trigger a due on sale clause. Because there's something called the St. Gardner Germain Act, where it does not trigger the due on sale clause because the trust is, you know, still because you didn't transfer it to another person, because you transferred it to an entity, which is a trust. So with that clause, it actually protects you from the due on sale clause being triggered. So the mortgage company is not going to call your loan due. The mortgage company, the mortgage is going to stay intact. The mortgage is going to remain in your personal name. The mortgage is going to remain on your personal credit. How often are these meetings and how do we make payment? So one thing is, if you guys want to secure the 20% off, then what you want to do is you want to put a deposit. So you can go check the link in the chat that we have here where it says, let's see, it says deposit. So let me find it. It says deposit. You can put a $200 deposit down, and then that will secure your spot for the discount, and then you can make payments. Thank you, Ika. And then you can make payments whenever you're ready. Okay. So we do have payment plan options available. So if you guys are interested in the course, because it's $997, you can do 3 payments of $359. If you're interested in do it yourself, because it's $2,500, you can do 5 payments of $549. And because you guys are interested in the one-on-one, you can do 4 payments of $2,650. So those are our payment plan options. If those options don't work for you, then you can actually customize it and you can create your own payment plan. So you just let us know what you want to pay and how often you want to pay, and then we can set up a custom payment plan for you. So I hope that answered your question. And let's see if we have any other questions. LaShonda said, I'm glad to be here. Hope there's a replay. Yes, so the replay is actually on our YouTube channel. So if you go to the number 7 Ways to Wealth, then on YouTube, you will be able to see our channel. You can also go to the link that you see inside the chat for our channel, and then you'll be able to watch the replay. So we are actually live on YouTube right now, and you'll be able to watch that replay of the entire webinar. The next question is, can you have multiple businesses in the business trust? So Annie, the question is yes, you can have multiple businesses managed by one business trust, which is the holding company. Danielle said, can I move my primary residence from the family trust to the faith-based to avoid taxes? So yes, so one is that it's not guaranteed that you're going to be tax exempt, but you're going to be qualified to apply for tax exemption. Can you move your primary residence? Yes. So all you would have to do is you would have to do another quick claim deed, and you would deed it over from the family trust into the faith-based trust. The next question is, if a person gets their birth certificate authenticated, can they put the birth certificate into the trust? The answer is yes. Your authenticated birth certificate is considered an asset. All assets can go inside the trust, so you would list it under the assets sheet inside of the trust as an asset. The next question is, what about getting the trust internationally recognized? So do you want to clarify that question? Internationally recognized? So I'm going to assume that you mean that you want it to be registered as a foreign entity. What you can do is, if you want it to, you can apply for a 98 number, and then through the IRS, it would be recognized as a foreign entity versus a domestic. So next question is, if you're an independent 1099 contractor, can you put the trust as the payee and have the trust pay you as an employee? Absolutely. So if you're an independent 1099, then what you can do is, you don't want to be double taxed. So your W-9 form, you're going to fill it out for the trust. So instead of you putting your name and your social, you're going to check the box that says trust. You're going to put the trust EIN, and then you'll submit it to the HR department. And so now they will be paying the trust entity. And so when you want money from the trust, instead of you issuing yourself a compensation and paying taxes on that, then what you can do is you can take out loans. So you can spend what you need to inside of the trust as an operating expense, and anything that's not trust related, meaning personal, you can borrow from the trust. You can take out a loan from the trust, and you don't pay taxes on loans. The next question, so Christina, will you be my seller for my 3 trusts once I build them? Yes, I do not mind being your settler. All right. And yes, the foreign entity. Yeah. Okay. And what would the purpose of holding an authenticated birth certificate in a trust? So, if you're born here in the US, right? When you're born, the United States, they actually create a sister cuvee trust, and then they attach it to an insurance policy, and then those policies, they actually trade on the stock market. So your sister cuvee trust has value, and what people do is they authenticate the birth certificate, which gives it value, and is considered an asset. And so from there, some groups, they decide to go after the funds behind that asset. So with that being said, because it's an asset, you can put any and all assets that qualify into a trust. So if it's an asset, yes, you can put it in a trust. So just like a painting, right? Some people might say, well, what's the value of putting a painting into a trust? Well, is it an asset? Yes. Does it hold value? Yes. Then you can put it into the trust. All right, guys, any other last questions? If not, then we are going to wrap it up, you guys. Namir, hey. All right, guys. So with that being said, thank
Oh
you.
yeah,
Go ahead.
the question about that last question that you just answered.
About the authenticated birth certificate.
Yes. So you say, I heard you say people go after it. Do you know any organizations that go after it?
Yeah, I've heard of a bunch of organizations that go after it. I don't know the
I'm
name.
saying, do you know any that successfully because don't it got something to do with insurance already, right? The
Yeah,
fidelity.
yeah, it does. Yeah.
Yeah, fidelity all day. I know that for sure. And it's another insurance. I forgot the name. Is it a black slide in the dictionary? But I've been had mine since like 17, right? I knew I had asset, but I don't really, you know what I mean? I got some ideas, but I need that mentorship right there.
Yeah, so I haven't seen physical proof of them going after the funds.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I should.
Alrighty. So with that being said, you guys, thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for, staying here and enjoying this webinar and participating and asking good questions. I really do appreciate you guys. And all I want to say is take action on the information that I provided tonight, because it can actually change the trajectory of your family. It can change the trajectory of your kids' life, because now you are going to be teaching them how to become trustees of the trust, versus just them not actually taking stewardship of the asset and their inheritance. Okay. So you guys are all generational curse breakers, and I just want to say, like I said, take action on the information. So you guys have an amazing and blessed night, and we will be back with another webinar next Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So have an